I am going to tell you something that might be unpopular in certain circles of this sport. Pedigree papers tell you almost nothing about whether a pigeon will be a champion middle-distance racer. I know fanciers who have spent enormous amounts of money on birds with impressive bloodlines who never produced a single good result. And I know fanciers, myself included, who have found genuine champions in birds with no notable pedigree at all, simply by knowing how to assess what is sitting in their hands. Today, I am going to teach you exactly how I select middle-distance candidates without looking at a single piece of paper. Just the bird. What I feel. What I see. What 13 years of holding pigeons has taught my hands to recognize. Middle-distance racing. For the purposes of this video, I am talking about distances roughly between 300 and 500 kilometers, sits in a unique physical category. It demands neither the pure explosive speed of a sprint bird nor the maximum endurance reserves of a true long-haul bird. It demands a hybrid athlete, a bird with enough power for a strong finish, but enough efficiency and stamina to sustain effort for 5, 6, sometimes 7 hours in the air. This hybrid requirement is exactly why middle-distance selection is, in my experience, the hardest of the 3 categories to get right. The margin for error is smaller. A bird built too much like a sprinter runs out of reserves before it gets home. A bird built too much like a long hauler lacks the competitive speed to place well against the clock. Let me walk you through exactly what I look for, starting with the overall body and working through every physical characteristic that matters. Body size first. A champion middle-distance bird sits between the compact tightness of a sprinter and the slightly larger frame of a long-distance bird. When I hold a middle-distance candidate, I want to feel a bird of medium size, not small and tight like a sprinter, not large and substantial like a long hauler, but balanced in between. The overall impression in your hand should be of a bird with presence, enough mass to suggest endurance capacity, but not so much that it feels heavy or cumbersome. I often describe it to newer fanciers as the difference between holding a tennis ball and holding a grapefruit. A sprint bird feels closer to the tennis ball. A long hauler feels closer to the grapefruit. The middle-distance champion sits right in between, call it the size of a good orange. The keel bone and breast muscle assessment is where the middle-distance bird reveals one of its most important distinguishing characteristics. Place your thumb at the tip of the keel and press gently into the muscle on each side, exactly as you would for any distance category. In a middle-distance champion, the muscle should be full and rounded, similar in overall mass to a sprint bird, but the texture under your thumb should feel slightly different. Where a sprint bird's muscle feels dense and almost hard, built for short explosive bursts, a middle-distance bird's muscle should feel full and firm, but with a touch more give. Less like pressing into a hard orange, more like pressing into a slightly riper one. This subtle difference reflects the muscle fiber composition. Middle-distance birds need a blend of fast-twitch fiber for competitive finishing speed and slow-twitch fiber for sustained effort. That blend shows up physically as muscle that is substantial and well-developed, but not as rigid as pure sprint muscle. I also assess keel length and depth specifically for middle-distance candidates. Run your finger along the full length of the keel bone from front to back. In my experience, the best middle-distance birds tend to have a slightly longer keel relative to overall body size than sprint birds do, providing more surface area for muscle attachment and supporting greater sustained muscular effort. This is a subtle measurement that takes practice to feel confidently, but over time your fingers learn to register the proportion almost automatically. The wings and primary feathers tell a similar hybrid story. Open the wing and examine the primaries just as you would for any distance. In a middle-distance champion, I look for primaries that are long and well-formed like a sprint bird's, but I pay particular attention to the overall feather density and the quality of the secondary feathers as well, not just the primaries. Middle-distance flight requires sustained wing efficiency over many hours, and the secondaries play a significant role in maintaining lift efficiency over a long, sustained flight. Run your fingers across the full span of the closed wing. The feather coverage should feel dense and complete with no thin patches or gaps. A wing with excellent primary feathers but patchy secondary coverage will perform well in a short sprint but lose efficiency over the longer middle-distance flight time. The back profile for a middle-distance bird should be flat like a sprint bird's. That aerodynamic efficiency matters at any distance, but I pay close attention to the muscling along the sides of the spine, sometimes called the saddle area. In a middle-distance champion, this area should feel well padded with lean muscle, providing the postural support needed to maintain efficient flight posture over many hours. A bird that feels flat and aerodynamic at the back, but lacks this saddle muscling may fatigue and lose form during the middle to later stages of a longer race. Assess the tail with the same approach as any racing bird: narrow, tight, stiff when you apply light pressure. For middle-distance birds, I also look at tail feather length relative to body size. A slightly longer tail relative to body size, which I sometimes see in good middle-distance birds, can provide additional stability and control during the extended steering and orientation demands of a longer flight, particularly during the final approach and landing after a tiring journey. The eye deserves the same careful examination you would give any racing candidate: vivid iris color, sharp pupil response, clean and tight surrounding tissue. For middle distance specifically, I pay close attention to the overall clarity and depth of the eye, rather than just the brightness. A middle-distance champion's eye, in my experience, often has a particular quality of depth and steadiness. It is not just bright, it has a settled, confident quality, even in a young bird. This is difficult to describe precisely, but becomes recognizable with experience. It is almost as if you can see the bird's capacity for sustained focus and composure reflected in the eye itself. Beak, throat, and overall head structure should be assessed exactly as I have described for sprint birds in a previous video: clean throat tissue, solid beak structure, healthy cere. These health basics apply to every distance category equally, and there is no compromise on them regardless of what distance you are selecting for. The legs and feet deserve particular attention for middle distance candidates because of the extended flight duration involved. Feel the warmth of the legs and the firmness of the grip exactly as you would for any bird, but also pay attention to the proportional length and strength of the legs relative to body size. Middle-distance birds that have performed well for me over the years have tended to have legs that feel proportionally strong and well-muscled rather than thin or delicate. This may relate to overall constitutional strength and the capacity to handle the physical demands of extended flight time, though I will be honest that this is one of the more subjective assessments in my system, and I weigh it less heavily than the breast muscle and feather assessments. Now let me talk about something that matters enormously for middle distance selection, specifically body composition and what I call reserve capacity. Hold the bird and assess not just the breast muscle but the overall sense of physical reserve in the body. A middle-distance champion should feel like it is carrying just slightly more physical substance than a pure sprint bird, not fat, but a subtle sense of additional reserve capacity throughout the body. This is difficult to quantify precisely, but experienced fanciers develop a feel for it. It is the difference between a bird that feels purely built for speed and a bird that feels built for speed with something extra in reserve for the later stages of a longer flight. This quality, reserve capacity alongside competitive muscle, is, in my opinion, the single most important characteristic separating a true middle-distance champion from a sprint bird that happens to also fly 500 kilometers occasionally. Temperament assessment for middle-distance birds follows similar principles to what I described for sprint birds, but with an important difference. I still want alertness and physical readiness when I hold the bird, that coiled spring quality, rather than a limp, indifferent feel. But for middle-distance candidates, I also pay close attention to the bird's apparent patience and steadiness. In the loft, observe how the bird behaves during longer periods of activity. Does it maintain consistent energy and behavior over an extended free-flying session, or does it show signs of flagging attention and energy partway through? A bird that maintains steady, consistent behavior and energy over a longer free-flying session in the loft is showing you a temperament trait that often translates directly to sustained performance over a longer race distance. The sprint bird that is explosively energetic for 15 minutes and then settles quickly may not show you the same sustained behavioral pattern that a good middle-distance bird will show. Watching the bird's free-flying behavior specifically for middle-distance assessment, I look for birds that fly longer sessions willingly and maintain good form, strong wing beat, good altitude, confident orientation, throughout the entire session rather than just at the start. This sustained quality in free flying is, in my experience, one of the more reliable indicators of middle-distance potential because it directly reflects the bird's capacity for sustained physical effort, which is exactly what a middle-distance race demands. Let me also mention something about how middle-distance candidates respond to road training specifically, because this observation has been valuable in my own selection process over the years. When I toss a group of young birds at a moderate distance, say 30 to 40 kilometers, and observe their return times and condition on arrival. The birds that come home not first but solidly within the main group and arrive home in good physical condition without appearing exhausted or distressed are often showing me middle distance potential. The bird that arrives first, slightly ahead of the group, every single time, often has sprint characteristics. The bird that arrives reliably with the main group consistently, race after race, in good condition. That consistency and physical resilience is a strong signal for middle distance capability. Putting this all together, body size between sprint and long haul, muscle that is full and firm with slightly more give than sprint muscle, dense and complete feather coverage, including the secondaries, well-muscled saddle area along the spine, a steady and composed eye quality, proportionally strong legs, that subtle sense of reserve capacity throughout the body, sustained temperament and behavior, and consistent solid performance in group toss training. These are the characteristics I assess when selecting middle distance candidates without any reference to pedigree. I want to be honest that this approach requires significant time and experience to develop reliably. You cannot read a single book and immediately have these skills in your hands. It comes from holding hundreds, eventually thousands of birds, comparing what you feel against what you observe in actual race performance over multiple seasons, and slowly building the physical intuition that connects what your hands feel to what happens on race day. I made plenty of selection mistakes in my early years using exactly this method because the skill was not yet developed. But over time, the accuracy of physical assessment becomes remarkably reliable, far more reliable, in my direct experience, than selecting based on pedigree alone. This does not mean pedigree is worthless. Good genetics absolutely matter, and a strong bloodline increases the probability of producing capable offspring. But genetics expressed through the development of an individual bird is what you are actually assessing when you hold it in your hands. Two birds from the same exceptional pedigree can develop completely differently. One may develop into a genuine champion. The other may simply not develop the physical qualities needed regardless of what is written on its pedigree card. Your hands tell you which bird you are actually holding. The paper tells you only what its parents accomplished. If you take one thing away from this video, take this. Spend time with your birds. Hold them regularly. Compare what you feel against what happens in actual races. Build the connection between physical assessment and real results over multiple seasons. This skill, more than any pedigree chart, more than any breeding theory, more than any amount of money spent on famous bloodlines, is what will make you a fancier who can consistently identify champions before they prove themselves on the road. Subscribe to Champion Pigeons for weekly videos on natural pigeon care, bird selection, racing preparation, and real loft experience. 13 years of keeping and racing pigeons, sharing what actually works. Comment below. Do you select your racing team by pedigree, by physical assessment, or a combination of both? I read every single comment. See you in the next video.